I was proud to wear the uniform. I marked Anzac Day this year because it would be the last time I probably wear the uniform.
Don't let this place be all you are, because it's a big surprise at the end if you do.
My service actually spans 52 years, and trying to navigate the legislation for entitlements is just insane, frankly.
When I hear people banding around SASR in their memes and online and all the rest of it, will pull your head in. Go and get a beret and then you can talk about it.
In a world drowning in wellness noise, fitness fads and curated perfection, we're here to talk about the reality. This is a space for the experts who have the data and the humans who have the scars. We're stripping away the bullshit to look at the areas of health that don't get enough attention and the evolution of how we'll live tomorrow. I'm Crystal Perkins, and this is Unfiltered, the truth about being human. Welcome to today's episode, The Uniform Comes Off, the Battle Doesn't. We're talking military and veteran health, wellbeing and personal journeys with Kate McGregor, AM, and Harry Moffat. First up, some statistics. We talk a lot about supporting our troops, but the data tells a much heavier story. Numbers that force us to realise the battle doesn't finish once deployment does. In fact, for many, the mental toll only intensifies at home. Veterans are nearly 3 times more likely to struggle with PTSD than the average Australian. As of early 2026, Australian veterans face significantly higher risks of suicide, homelessness, and PTSD compared to the general population. But behind every statistic is a human life and a family. That's why we're here today, to put the faces to the data and to talk about the unfiltered truth behind these stories. I'm honoured and very pleased to be joined today by 2 wonderful guests. Our first guest is a woman who has navigated some of the most complex transitions a human can face. Kate McGregor is a senior Army veteran, 2016 nominee for the Australian of the Year, a previous group captain in the Australian Air Force, and a colonel in the Australian Army, serving our country over 3 decades. But beyond the rank and the accolades, Kate joins us to share a raw, unfiltered reality of personal health and a journey that began in terms of being in uniform and also out of uniform. Joining the conversation to provide his perspective on military health is Harry Moffat, who spent almost 30 years in the Australian Defence Force, most of which was spent with Australia's Special Air Service Regiment as a team commander and a team specialist. He has served in 11 active deployments. As a former SAS team commander turned psychologist, Harry occupies a rare space at the intersection of elite tactical leadership, psychology, and mental health expertise. He is here to help us dismantle the structural imbalances in veteran care and move past the traditional way of doing things. Welcome, Harry. Welcome, Kate.
Hi.
Thanks, Crystal.
To the both of you, just after hearing some of those statistics, where do you think the system is still failing Australian Defence personnel? And what's one reform or another that would genuinely change outcomes?
Well, thanks for having us on, Crystal, and Kate's good to see you again. Look, I think that's a very complex area, and we could go to a myriad of different directions, or take it in a myriad of different directions. But I think one big kind of strategic purview, if you will, is the ESO community, of which there's 5,500, maybe more now, independent veteran support groups.
Right.
It's very complex to navigate for veterans when they first come out. And it's kind of, if you look at it from that perspective, they're all kind of in competition with each other. And I mean that with a small c competition to get veterans through the door and give them services, and it can kind of incentivize the system a little. So I think that none of that's meant, and it's all well meant, but it becomes very confusing very quickly. And I think one change we could make is to maybe draw some thematics across there. Like, some people do education, some do alternative and complementary therapies, and others do straight leg psychology. Well, let's get everybody who does education, group them all up, and try and swim together in the same lane. And sometimes the organisations can work at cross purposes, and I think that that creates gaps or fractures or confusion for some veterans. Who do they go to, and what do they really need? Some veterans need a Medicare card, others need something they don't yet understand.
Interestingly, there's a underutilisation aspect of veterans coming out and not actually applying or using those services and in terms of getting that help. That's one aspect. And then the other is the unemployment aspect as well. So it'd be interesting around bringing them together, as you're saying, to be able to support those various facets of the veteran transition process. Would you start it before the transition process begins or at the point of once you've left?
I think there is a bit of an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff approach, and there necessarily needs to be, because people are not going to stop discharging. But I think there's an opportunity here to have that process starting along. I go back to Perth regularly and speak to the new operators coming through, and thankfully we're now having that discussion at the start of their career. What's your plan B? What will you be? Don't let this place be all you are, because it's a big surprise at the end if you do. So we've got education programs, endogenously in the unit, and there's a culture building around that. And education's not the only offering, but there's a broader discussion on who are you when you're not inside Campbell Barracks.
It's incredible. I commissioned as a 37-year-old, so I'd had a life before I joined the military, and I was pretty strong in my identity, and I did notice those things, that my peers and service members did not have life experience because they had joined at such a young age, and they were somewhat unsure of identity and an understanding of the real world. And so I think that's really important around having those skill sets and being able to cope. Kate, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think echoing what Harry said, I was in the ESO sector and monitored every public hearing of that Royal Commission and was providing analysis at the end of each day for Stephen Day, who was president of Queensland RSL at the time. And the complexity of the ESO sector is a real issue. There are far too many, some of which start up as a sole operator getting DVA funding to well-intentioned, as Harry said. I don't question people's bona fides, but it's very fragmented, hard to navigate, and the proliferation of them, it's not helping the people that they're designed to serve. The second thing is there's a toxicity in the space as well, that petty rivalries over branding and stuff, and that in the end was one of the reasons I was pleased to step away from it. The complexity of the legislation's another one. My service actually spans 52 years. So I've got injuries from my second year at RMC, for which I required surgery, that occurred in 1976. And trying to navigate the legislation for entitlements is just insane, frankly. And I'm not going to join the pile-on DVA. I think they're, again, well-intentioned people, but they're drowning in stuff. They're being required to deal with complex cases and complex legislation. I succeeded on appeal to the VRB in a couple of cases after getting absolute word salads as decisions that were unintelligible, and what should have been slam dunks in that case. So I sympathise with everyone involved in the ecosystem because it is incredibly complex to navigate. And finally, we're just on Harry's point as well. One of the cliches that came out of the whole Royal Commission was you start transitioning from the day you take the oath. And I think that it sounds trite, but there is some truth in that. And but again, all very well to tell people you need to start planning from the day you march in, but there needs to be some guardrails in place to help people understand that. Healthcare being one of the big ones, because the number of veterans I've seen who've been bewildered hitting the streets after being literally living on bases that had hospitals and daily sick parades, and then, hang on, what's Medicare? Because they've never actually used it. Get to a certain age and go, how the heck do I do it? What, like all my data's with Defence, how do I get a profile in this thing? And so that is one area that I have seen people get absolutely inundated with grief over.
Absolutely, and those services that we have in society and in terms of health and other facets are there for us as an Australian community, but unfortunately military communities somewhat don't have a relationship with it until too late.
Sure.
We often hear statistics about veteran mental health like we did earlier, but the numbers don't always capture the full story. How do you think we could bridge the gap between defence data and the lived experience of veterans on the ground, especially when it comes to early intervention and long-term care?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of parts. Again, this is very complex.
Yeah.
Veterans don't know what they don't know. And when you're in service, everything's going swimmingly for the overwhelming majority of people. And it's not until they kind of get to the end of their service and, you're given a plaque and a pat on the bum and off you go. Thanks for your service. So, I think there's something in preparing them for that departure. And again, as I said before, this is where I think there's an opportunity inside to vents to help along the journey. It doesn't mean we need to have extra resources or extra people, but there's conversations that can be had in terms of professional development everywhere along a soldier, sailor or airwoman or man's career. They do promotion courses, etc. So there's a discussion there. So it's open. I actually think veterans, push back slightly and say our veterans have great support. We're one of the best supporters of veterans in the world. It's all a little bit disorderly and a little kind of disheveled. And you used fragmented is a wonderful word because it kind of evokes this kind of like not a shattering, but it's ready to. And there's some strong leadership required. But the services are out there. I just saw a wonderful man, Jeff Jackson, who just finished something like 40 years with the RSL after 30 years in the military. He's retired finally, and he works out on the streets with homeless at the Vasey Clinic in Melbourne, etc., with the toughest of the tough cases. So there's a lot of support right at the grass levels. And I think sometimes just got to be careful about listening too much to the noise at the periphery of that, because I work with now hundreds of veterans, not right now, but over my journey since I've become a psychologist, and place them and work with them individually or help them into navigate the system. And it kind of works, but it just takes so much effort to work through it. And it takes someone like Jeff, and I'm nowhere near the level of a Jeff Jackson, who's a wonderful, great Australian legend. But for me, it's just really, really hard. Really, really hard to keep up the effort and to navigate. So again, it comes back to some reconciliation of the system itself, because I think there's lots of psychologists leaning into the space, lots of peer support, lots of good programs, just not being picked up or being sold, I guess, to the veterans.
And you're focused in your work, Harry, on education programs. It'd be great to understand what you're doing with those programs for defence.
About 15 years ago, I put forward a proposal to SOCOM, because that's my kind of area, so I'll kind of hug that, we should be educating soldiers before they leave, or giving them the opportunity to do so. And as we were saying earlier, that the current or the then provision was highly biased towards officers and to skills, which is fine, that's necessary, and I get that. So but there wasn't anything, unless you want to be a doctor, an engineer, or a tankie, or your master's in tanks. I don't know, but so we just went and raised money externally and found the money and started that. And that's been going for 10 years solid now. We've got PhDs coming off the back. We've got people, small business owners. One of the big success stories, a guy got out, bought a run of hairdressers and salons and did them up and sold them. So I really think that it's kind of an example of the kind of psycho-social education, financial education along the way that we need to be having a lot earlier. When you were talking before, Kate, I was thinking about we've been here before. The Greeks would when they took their soldiers to their agogis and trained them up. One of the reading the fragments that are left from that, one of the imperatives in their training was to reinforce in the soldiers that they are citizens first and soldiers second, and at some stage you need to return back to the tribe.
Being human again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so don't lose contact. So here's some skills and things, along the way, and they prepared them, I think, with that in mind. Yes, be a soldier, defend the country and all the rest of it, but ultimately we want great citizens. So when you finish, you've got so much to give, and go off and be the citizen that we need you to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that philosophy is also a practice in that respect, and being able to actually live again in society. It's almost like incarcerated people coming back into society.
I think so, yeah. I don't think that's too dramatic a point to make. I think that's,
And being able to flick the switch, which is what you're talking about. And early intervention, I think, and long-term care, it's, starting early or being preventative in the approach, which is what you're saying with education. But then there's the long-term care facets of once things break. Kate, what are your thoughts about both?
Just when you initially raised the question, Crystal, I know there was a lot of discussion, again, the number of witnesses who talked about involuntary separation through a serious injury, broke their heart. They always thought they were going to be in for life. In very short order, lose defence-supported housing, end up maybe abusing substances, including pain relief substances and stuff, and then find when they're trying to navigate the DVA system that all their documents are held by the military system, but the DVA system is firewalled because of the Privacy Act, and they can't get access to stuff. Things that they assumed DVA would know about their service aren't transparent. Now, again, I'm told that was improving and was being fixed. Certainly in my own case, I haven't had nearly the intensity of operational experience Harry has had, but I gave up. My most substantial deployment was CO of the training team in Timor-Leste. That's not even on my operational log. And I just gave up fighting them because I got told I had qualifying service based on 3 other deployments. I just went, right, I'll live with that. But the most meaningful isn't in my recognition of service. I don't know why that is. I think it was because it wasn't I think it was being run out of Strategic Policy Division rather than out of Joint Operations Command. Anyway, don't want to take people down that rabbit hole, but that was a case study of just what so many people gave evidence about at the Royal Commission of going, I go to DVA and they are blind as to what I've actually done. And people who are, in some cases, quite broken, probably pretty distressed, are put to proof from ab initio, yes, I was in the army. And I left under these circumstances and I did the following things. And they're being put to proof of that as though nothing had been done. Now, I did see recently that a lot of my stuff had been imported into my DVA profile.
Right.
It's not as accurate as I'd like, but I gave up fighting City Hall in the end because for the purposes of recognition of certain treatments and things, I got a tick and I stopped fighting it. But for someone with really substantial war fighting, if they were in that category and finding it impossible to prove things, it must be just mind-boggling, frankly.
Almost re-traumatising to have to
that's
prove.
what the Commission did ultimately say. I am confident that it's on the improve if it hasn't been eradicated entirely, but there was a privacy issue around access to material that was really bothering people.
It just seems really disconnected and then fraught because you're fighting your own health battles and then you have to fight a system.
Yeah.
I am truly, fascinated to see where it does go because DVA still has a backlog with thousands of cases. I know they've put on more resources and there are some very serious matters that need to be worked through. But again, as you said, Kate, legislation, policy, leadership needs to keep up. And so in thinking about all the things that we've just talked about, we've just had Anzac Day again for this year, and the meaning of Anzac Day today is certainly on the top of my mind about some of the data we've talked about, the issues in the public domain, leadership and having situations where we've now appointed a world first female Chief of Army. We have the Ben Roberts-Smith case. We have the first Defence Secretary who's a female. We have a new defence strategy, a new investment strategy. There's a lot going on in terms of defence in Australia and the culture. I guess after this year's Anzac Day, and congratulations, Kate, to you in terms of your service and coming up after decades. Do you think, to the both of you, in terms of Anzac Day this year, do you think Australia is truly honouring the service and sacrifice of veterans in a meaningful way? Or has it become, or our members in a meaningful way, not just our veterans, or has it become more symbolic than substantive when it comes to supporting member and veteran health and wellbeing?
Well, you know, I can only talk about my experience of it, and you know, I'm the product of a first AIF and second AIF lineage. My grandfather was 21st and 24th Battalion Western Front. My dad was 2 Air Support Control in the the Boona-Gona campaigns, and went back for Lae-Wewak. Both were wounded and hospitalised and returned to operations after being wounded. I just sort of look at my service and think in their much less lengthy service, faced more hardship than I did. I was raised with Anzac Day having a mystique, but look, I was proud to wear the uniform. I marked Anzac Day this year because it would be the last time I probably wear the uniform, and I did something meaningful about it. I'd be interested to hear Harry's perspective, both because he's a slightly younger cohort behind me.
Thank you.
Some of the hijacking of it by the culture war stuff around Susan Coyle's appointment, and the sort of seeing sort of the flip side of the coin of the BRS indictment. There's when you really scratch the surface, a lot of people, one, are trying to hijack the day now to beat their chests about culture war stuff.
Right.
That's coming from outside the veteran community. Must have impacted you, Crystal, to see the acknowledgements or welcomes to country being booed by people because they've now decided that no, that's disrespectful of the Anzac tradition. And I just have a sense we're at a tipping point where the day does have to reinvent itself to some extent. In the sense, I happen to be a believing Catholic. I went to Mass to mark Anzac Day rather than go to the dawn service because I wanted to pray and contemplate. So I can understand why an atheist might want to boo when they start saying prayers. Do we draw the line at that? Is that free speech? Some of what I think amongst civilians and especially politicians, they all think a veteran looks like their granddad.
Yes.
They've completely lost sight of the fact that there's a younger cohort from all the services.
Yeah.
There are females who deployed to Afghanistan in logistics and other roles. Everyone thinks that everyone's fixing a bayonet on a 303 to charge at the neck, and not everyone's service is like that.
Yeah. The
very best of us, and Harry's unit did all the heavy lifting in Afghanistan, have done that, but there is an entire cohort that never went to action or instant on their personal weapon.
Yes.
And I think there's got to be room. Those people have all served and warrant recognition. But I think the imagery of what a veteran looks like is probably a bit mythical, and I find that a bit frustrating in the end. In that the people slashing, hitting their keyboards about Susan Coyle, whom I've known for 30 years. How many of those medals are for being under fire? Well, mate, if you actually took the medals off most of the force who haven't been under fire, no one outside the Special Air Service Regiment would be wearing. Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. Harry?
It's been an Anzac Day like no other. It really has.
Yeah.
And that's my view, and my wife would agree with me. And disappointingly, I'll go on the record. I am on the record that the way that Susan Coyle's position was treated in social, it's just disgraceful. But thankfully, a small cohort of noisemakers, the BRS thing has been co-opted. That needs to play out. It needs to play its course. It's a very, very serious matter. The booing of the Welcome to Country is disingenuous, really, because the RSL actually sets the agenda.
Yes.
So you kind of, it's really quite disingenuous. But what I would say to those people is bugger off. Go and boo on your television and boo with each other. But don't bring down the Anzac. You are corrupting the Anzac spirit. You're not adding or value to it. So you certainly don't have my vote. I've thought about this, and I'm thinking I got a bit angry and thought, bloody leave Anzac Day alone. But I couldn't agree more with Kate. There is a need for reinvention. I just wonder if these are the growing pains of a reinvention, because if you to believe the numbers, kind of anecdotally, Anzac Day is bigger than it's been in a long while, apparently, and I have my own evidence of that, of the Flemington service which we go to, and it's wonderful. There's 100 young cadets out there, more than ever, more than that, maybe a couple of hundred this year. Square gating, and they've got everything's a bit askew, and the shirts hanging out here, etc. It's wonderful, it's beautiful, and there were more kids than we've ever seen there in the 10 years we've been going. But I think it's true, and I don't think Australia's switched off. People say, we don't show enough reverence to our veterans, etc. I think we do. So I think Australia actually does it pretty bloody well. We've got a day a year. So for all the noisemakers out there, make your noise elsewhere. Leave Anzac Day alone. If RSLs and shrines and places of service want to hold their service their way, show respect to that.
Yeah.
And some places didn't have Welcome to Country, and that's okay too. So, I just think I've got to be careful as a psychologist in me, and things are never as bad as they seem and never as good as they seem, and groups are never as big as they seem or as small as they seem. So I think let the noise rattle out. I just hope we can we can bring Anzac Day back onto an even keel next year. We had a couple of years of booing and all this toxicity. I hope a lot more people speak out and speak down about that. Find the moral courage to do so, and dampen the noise, because they're only a small group of fist waving kind of nobodies, really.
And most not veterans too, Harry.
That's right.
What I've noticed. But you make a really important point there. I just reminded me, the very first Anzac Day that I was eligible to wear the uniform of the Australian Army, the upper classes didn't get up at the dawn service. That was a privilege of not.
Was it?
Yeah. So all of the fourth class over the hill on the buses to the Pool of Remembrance at the War Memorial.
Right.
There were a smattering of World War II veterans who were probably our age then or younger.
Yeah.
I can remember a group of nuns around the Pool of Remembrance singing, and we all fitted inside the Pool of Remembrance at the Australian War Memorial. The idea of a dawn service with 30-odd thousand civilians with candles, I'm pretty sure that explosion of interest happened after Bob Hawke went over for the 75th.
Right.
There was no interest whatsoever.
There you go.
Coming off the back end of the Vietnam moratorium movement.
Yep.
Back on base, we did a parade then in the morning, marched up to General Bridges' grave. He was killed at Gallipoli, clocked off at noon. I think the Vietnam guys from the drillies and instructors probably went to the snake pit for a few beers. It was not a big deal in Australia at that time.
Not as it is today. I
nowhere near
with
the
that.
scale of it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of if I see someone making a fuss about some of the stuff, I want to see who they are and where they served, if at all.
Yes.
Because the noisiest seem to be people who haven't.
Yeah.
And secondly, you made another great point, Harry, that I wanted to just acknowledge. We do have a very generous veterans entitlement system in Australia by world standards. It's complex and a bit messy, but if you can get access, I've been very fortunate to land some entitlements only this calendar year. It took ages. But there are, again, some professional grievance mongers who've made an industry out of being famous for being the aggrieved veterans.
That's right. Yeah.
Won't name them here, but that's become a brand for them. And frankly, the vast majority ultimately do get reasonably decent support in some form or another.
The other point I wanted to make was on the mythologisation. Is that a word? I just made it, so it is now.
It is. It can
be. The Anzac. And it's an important one. Emile Durkheim, who I buy into, one of the French sociologists early this century, would talk about cultures and tribes needing mythologies, totems, to set standards and remind us of standards. Religion plays that role for some. Others, for me, Albert Jacka, I evoke Albert Jacka, as someone who is a soldiering kind of standard. So we need those. But, in Australia as a nation, the Anzac totem myth, whatever you want to call it, or the spirit is huge, and for all of us, it's in our minds. Particularly in white Australia, it is where we made our name on the stage and really did make a big name. Australia punched way above its weight in both world wars, and so there is something to commemorate, maybe not celebrate, but it gets to a point where it's over mythologized, and then there's overlays of current affairs and world, and so it gets kind of caught up, and people think they have a right to leverage that myth or that totem because, yes, we all feel very close to it and we feel it's part of us and it's really important to us. But I think it's more important to make sure you separate those grievances and what's going on in the background from what the true spirit is and what should be respected. And I think it's as I said before, disingenuous. I think it's pretty immature to look at Anzac Day as a place to make pretty unsophisticated. But that mythology is really important to us as a nation. You're kind of undermining all of us when you attack it or attach, co-opted kind of things to it.
And in thinking of those philosophies, certainly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and non-Indigenous people, we protect country together, and we have that in common. And the totem philosophy that you're talking about, Harry, is certainly something that Aboriginal people of Australia identify with, in that we have our totems and our places, and we protect country based on that symbology or those parts of our society that connect us to country.
Yeah.
And I think the Anzac spirit has been very focused about, the promotion and protection of country with Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And so it was quite sad to see that our leaders were up doing a very traditional and important aspect of Australian life, which is we are all a part of country and we are all welcome on the country. So I think understanding what our symbols are and our history and what the philosophies are has probably been lost.
Yeah.
But absolutely agree around diversity of veterans and members and the fact that it's more engaged. I think as a younger service member, I've seen my friends get far more engaged and excited in communities about service. Thinking about now and what's happening in terms of service and active conflict around the world, it appears to be more pervasive than ever. Harry, from a psychological perspective, how does the always-on nature of modern global conflict change the way that we have to deliver care to those who are essentially living in high-stakes environments?
Yeah, I guess when you're surrounded by it, and it feels like we are with social media and access, definitely can disrupt care delivery of care and if I speak from experience, I spend a lot of time, as I said, triaging for veterans because there are nuances in the types of delivery and the types of care that they might need. It's very hard to fight against that. It's not long in a therapy session or a podcast before you bring up the events of the day. and how they impact. And then it's very hard to dig past that at an individual level with someone, past those to get to the point where we can build insight, which is the job of a psychologist, that for people to understand themselves at a deeper level and then come to terms with what's going on for them. So the noise is very distracting, and it can be a hard kind of filter to get through, or a blanket to kind of work through, if you like. My message would be in those instances is for people to stop following, become aggressive and disciplined about who you follow on social media. Have detox. You find the noise goes away. This, in my experience, with working with veterans and others. This is not just a veteran. We're talking about a broader kind of concept. This happens in the corporate sector in sports. It's amazing how quickly that feeling goes away when you stop. You are able to filter your own consumption of the noise. It can be hard because you want to know what's going on in the world. The second part is, if you are going to consume information, because this is highly processed information. I talk about information is like McDonald's. This is highly processed food that's not got not much nutritional value, certainly no additive or accretive kind of value nutritionally. And information's the same way. So you look after yourself, you eat well, you choose, discerningly about what you listen to and what you read, and vary it. Don't just eat the same stuff all the time. And so there's some things to kind of combat that. But short answer is it's very hard. And to anyone who's out there who feels struggling, or they're drinking too much, there's some really low level indicators that things aren't going well for you. Try exercising more, prioritize your sleep, eat well, debrief often, but also be careful of the processed information that you're being led to. Humans, even in the face of unequivocal evidence, will hold on to beliefs because they hold on to the tribe. The group is the prize, not the information, not the gaining of knowledge. It's the group that you're associated with that is driving you. And I think there's a lot more education that needs to go on, not just for veterans, but broadly, but certainly veterans. It's getting in your way to making that transition, and transition's awesome. I'm telling you, it's out. I've done it. I'm out, and I'm a civvy now. And it's awesome. It's absolutely wonderful. But you've just got to get out of your own way and seek help if you can't. Yeah, absolutely. Kate, having spent 3 decades serving with the ADF, and you're, as you mentioned, until next week. What do you currently see working well?
In which space?
Across defence, or what could be improved?
I've been thinking about it a bit as the clock draws down, and I think defence to me always conjures up the images of Russell and the bureaucracy, whereas I tend to think about the army. And I think the training system and the building of an ethos and bonding people through shared hardship stuff, I think we do that really well. And an image came to me of when I was viewing the service. My final deployment was Operation Astute, and I can remember I got rushed in short notice because I speak Tedun, having run the training team. And FFDTL had started to go rogue, so they needed people who knew the principal players in FFDTL and spoke Tedun. So I got rushed in really short notice. Had to do a sort of prep firing on the Darwin range to get handed a weapon that throwing the ballistic vest and got in there. I had my 50th birthday at Duntrine House on a Friday night, and I was on a foot patrol with some people whose names I won't use on Monday afternoon. But the point of the story is, I'm standing there about D+7 or something. Manura comes alongside and they have hot box meals for the first time and everyone can go and have a shower. Brigade commander, brigade RSM, all the 05s, all the senior NCOs all stand there with their weapons over their shoulder. No one dreamt of getting a fresh meal until the last soldier had eaten. No one dreamt of going on board and getting a warm shower until the last soldier had done it. And that's the ethos that I imbibed when I joined in 1974. Your platoon commander's notebook was reviewed by your company commander and CO before they did your PAR. And if you hadn't been visiting the lines on a pay night, seeing whether your lads had been riding home, whether they were getting mail from home, all these markers, you were regarded as not taking decent care of your troops and being a jack leader, basically. And to see that spirit was alive when I got there, and I'll close out on this too. Like you, Harry, I've been going to outlying places for my Anzac commemorations to get out of the city. I've been to Ackland, a small place in Queensland. I've been to Warrnambool and had the honour of leading the march there. And seeing these kids coming through in their cadet uniforms, loving it to bits, I think the ethos is really alive and well, and I think the people shouting at clouds about welcomes to country and everyone's going soft and she hasn't got the ICB. Well, when you've done half of what anyone else has done, mate, you get an opinion. I think Army does that stuff extraordinarily well. I do think we need to get a bit more, just a bit more realistic about explaining to people that when you do exit the system, the transition stuff is important. We need to, and I haven't been through a transition cell for a long time, but they do need to get better at some of the mechanics of, there is this thing called a Medicare card, here's, whatever. I don't think that's fully joined up and harmonised yet, but on balance, I look back and I think the Army's a wonderful national institution. It's got great values.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's shifted in 50 odd years.
It's a great, it's a wonderful opportunity. What's it called? The gap year scheme, which I finished my time in Melbourne in defence recruiting. And I when I saw it, I thought, why the hell isn't this in every school? And I mean, you don't necessarily want, it has to be voluntary, etc. I get it, but it's a wonderful. It's taken up every year. At the end of World War One, towards just after World War One, a lot of people complained, "Oh, we've lost all our men," and they went off to war, and the next generation's getting soft. And well, guess what? The 16, 17, 18-year-olds went off to World War II and did a pretty good job. The same thing in Vietnam. Vietnam, you agree with it or not? The soft generation of the 60s went off and did a pretty bloody good job, and I think the same will happen. There's a little bit of, as I said before, there's a little bit of psychology in this. Nothing's ever as bad as it seems or as good as it seems. Right. Yes, we need to put a bit more effort into some parts of the Defence Force, but, to the people who say we need, more people to recruit, it costs a load of money to keep a standing army through peacetime. That's one thing. It's a bit trite to say it, but I have faith that there's plenty of young charges, and I'm kind of sailing my own boat here, but I mentor a bunch of young men who are going through defence at the moment and having an excellent experience, and wouldn't change it for the world. That's wonderful to hear, isn't it? Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. And really good. Off of another mantra of mine, that I receive letters of they're reflecting on their time, and so I have much more faith that things aren't as bad as what some people will say, but. But again, very small group. I think we should be very proud of our Defence Force, full stop, and doing a great job right now overseas and elsewhere. Absolutely. And as a smaller force, we tend to do things very well, as we're talking about. We're trained well, we train others well. Yeah. We lift our weight in terms of, what has happened around the world, and we continue to keep supplying and supporting around the world. And in thinking about that and global conflict, we're seeing what I mentioned before, this always on conflict that is going on, and it's happening with Ukraine, it's happening in terms of attrition war, the US and Israel and Iran, exchanges involving drones, proxies, precision strikes, all this sort of stuff that is going on.
We're seeing a lot of information on social media. We're seeing Lego videos coming out that are actually giving the community online more information than I think some of the press conferences that governments are having around the world. So information warfare is changing. From a psychological and an operational standpoint, question for the both of you, how do you think this shift from episodic deployments to, say, indefinite high-stake environments, like what we're seeing in these parts of the world, how do we think that's changed the mental health load on serving members compared to the wars you may have deployed to in your time?
I guess, I was talking about this recently. We used the example of the soldiers coming back from World War I being on a ship and being able to debrief. Now, it's the evidence around that's probably a little rubbery. It's anecdotally and intuitively it makes sense, and there's something in that. But they had horrendous problems coming back from World War I, and they were, suicide rates untraceable really, and a lot of men disappeared off into their £1 plots up at Stall or wherever, in different varying parts around the country. They're given land and whatnot. So I say that to make the point that in a lot of ways it hasn't changed. There is a reality to going away, to fighting war, and especially being in combat. Seeing, the thing for me that always catches me is nostalgia around children and how their impact, dying, dead children, etc. And that's just a reality of war. So I think that there's some inescapable truths, and going right back to the start, if we can help people navigate to the right place for what they need. Some veterans are getting help for traumatic experiences that they haven't experienced personally. Right. So it's happened, through experience of others, or the reality is some people can conjure up imaginative thoughts in their head, and that's real. I'm not saying that they're weak or different. But human brain acts in different ways, and we conjure things up. So what am I saying is that things haven't changed too much. Right. The always on is, going back to my point, is that you're immersed in it more, and I hesitate to use the word, but it can be more triggering more often all the time. Right. And the obstacle is the way on this, because unless you tune out to that and break the cycle of addiction, and I said it, and there's an addictive quality now to, and purposefully you are being targeted. Don't delude yourself. We are all being targeted very, very cleverly. Unless you can break that cycle, then I'm afraid you're very difficult to help. So that's the real issue now, notwithstanding the trauma experienced by people. Yeah. And another thing that's coming out now, and this will play out through the court systems now, is moral injury, and it's a whole other episode. But it's such a complex vector, or it's complicated by so many vectors that I think we're going to see conversations open up about moral injury and how we address those, because I think a lot of those go by the way, and I'm dissing my own industry, my own colleagues or profession for a moment, but psychology doesn't give you the wherewithal to deal with these, the like a moral injury. And unless you're a wily old psychologist, and I mean in experience, I'm generally, I haven't been doing it for that long comparatively to some, it's very hard for a young psychologist to understand the difference between a mental health condition or even a disorder and moral injury through experience in the military. And I guess I have a rare insight into that, because moral injury, you really need to have understood the ethos and where the belief system kind of sits before you can start to unpack it. It makes it very difficult. So no quick fixes, I'm sorry, Crystal, but I urge anyone, veterans listening, to take command of your own destiny and filter the information and shut it off. I have, and it's wonderful. It's releasing, and I let my wife kind of help me out with the information that kind of that I think is beneficial. Yeah, absolutely. And family is really important
in terms of having that support network and that foundation to come back to. I think after you and I were talking about, living in another world for a while, but coming back to strong networks of support. Kate, what are your thoughts then on psychological and operational standpoints?
I guess, I defer to Harry both in his current profession and previously in Special Forces, who did an inordinate amount of the heavy lifting. Even the RAR battalions were kind of jealous and feeling frozen out because of the nature of those operations. But I think your episodic point, mate of mine, John Blaxland, wrote a book called Niche Wars, and that has been the entire history of the ADF I've served in that we get sent on expeditionary operations, generally under coalition command. So there's no widespread community awareness of what's going on. You look back at the guys we lost in Afghanistan, these isolated ramp ceremonies, a couple of minutes on the news, and isn't that sad? Lest we forget. But the fact is, I think there isn't community engagement or understanding of what's gone on with a lot of the niche deployments. So it makes the bonds of service even more important. And the flip side of that, of course, is that when a separation happens, you've got to have mechanisms in place to maintain your equilibrium. And to be able to accept that chapter's over and do something different. But no, I don't have any magic elixir on that one. I've been very, very fortunate in terms of I confronted my alcoholism, substance abuse issues a long time ago, and I got lucky in the sense that I no longer drink or use any unprescribed meds, and I found a way of life that was between service components. I pulled out. I left the ADF in 81 and then re-enlisted later. And I hit a rock bottom and got sober in 1990. And so I've got a whole series of coping mechanisms and a sort of fellowship that's a bit like as tight as the army around me. When I'm having a rough day, I can ring someone who understands what I'm going through. So I'm a bit of a rare case in that regard. But
brilliant. That's brilliant.
It is.
But I understand the recognition, needing that when I ring up and say, this is bothering me, and someone goes, I get it, and tension goes out of the shoulders. So I've been a bit lucky in that regard.
I call that the third thing. You might have heard me talk on that before. But,
and what is that?
Your first thing's your family, and your second thing's your vocational work, and sometimes they're flipped, so you can be, or they're all something like, and your third thing's you. Bugger the family, bugger the vocation. I'm going to the cricket club was mine, and so I'm catching up with cricket mates tonight or tomorrow night.
You have that in common, the both of you,
and that cricket club when I came home didn't care about the essay. Initially, they kind of it's really essay, what's all but when they got over that, and saw I was just a rubbish, average soldier, and an average uphill into the breeze bowler, swing bowler, but that became a place where I had. You might say a separate identity or another identity. It wasn't. It was a deeper and richer identity, not just. And the soldier was a huge part of that. But it wasn't all of that. And so, it's a phrase I'm kind of ad nauseum now. That but what are you doing while you're serving? I don't care if it's crochet, cricket, or canasta. You need to have something outside of the military to keep you grounded. And the analogy of the surf zone comes to mind. You can feel the water. You can feel the sand, you're not stable. And I think when you have when you return to the beach, like your third thing, you can be on firm grounding, and that can carry you through that transition. It's not all of the answer, but it gives you something else. And importantly, it builds a trust in another tribe, if you will, or an extended community that you can go to when you're kind of going, where am I in the world? I'm back in the surf zone. Throw me a line or something. And that third thing, I think, is
the third thing.
Good concept you raise. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, and important to have that support at all times, I think, and an understanding of the different roles that you play. So if you've got family that understand, or friends or peers that you can have honest conversations with to process what's going on. From an insider's view, how did elite SAS culture, if we think it was that, and the operational tempo, say in Afghanistan, create an environment where these alleged acts could occur if they did?
Yeah, I think the high operational tempo definitely had something to undermined the culture through fatigue, and there definitely was, I think Klaus calls it a friction, a build-up of friction where easy things become very, very difficult to do. And I think there was we're a tired unit. I remember looking around in 2010 and 2011 at everyone, and it was retired. And as a result, people were grumpy, and any fractures in the unit were amplified. And there was, I don't mind saying, I've said it before, I'm on the public record to say that it got bad for a while. The culture was quite toxic, and there was infighting and etc. And that's all in the open now, clearly. What I would say is that the culture and the operational tempo at the moment is excellent. The unit. I'm so proud of the unit. They've served, I think, the busiest organisation in Australia. I'll say arguably. Yeah. And they've maintained the operational tempo, and they've had people coming in with rubber gloves on, poring over the unit. We've had additional command structures put on place, audits of everything, and bring it. I think the unit has gone, obstacle is the way. Let's get this done. Okay. And so I'm really proud of the unit, how it stands. The culture is strong. As I said, I visit back there regularly. And so I'm kind of caught my kind of zoom out lens on this is, one, really pissed off and really angry that people are subordinating SAS with, I'm going to say it, BRS, and that's what it's become about. And let me remind everyone that an individual is never bigger than the unit. And when you are subordinating the unit, you are hurting SAS, which is the brand that we all borrow. And occasionally people get to say the word and feel good about it. And so that makes me angry. And when I hear people banding around SASR in their memes and online and all the rest of it, we'll pull your head in. Go and get a beret, and then you can talk about it. So that's the first thing. The other thing is fascination. I am fascinated by this case as a psychologist. It's
polarizing.
It is. It's polarizing. People are just attaching themselves left, right, and centre. Ben deserves his day in court, and he'll get it because we're in Australia, and that's the proper process. So presumed innocent until proven otherwise. Yeah. But we want the regiment, SAS regiment demands accountability and integrity. It says it on the can, and it says it over the entrance as you walk in the place and receive your beret. So that's the second thing. The third thing for me is the family, the extended community, SAS. Yeah. I'm deeply connected to that, and I want to be there for those people, and that they are a priority for me, not the kind of the side. The system will work out as it goes, but it's unit first. That's the first principle for me. So I'm kind of watching with great interest, and obviously personal interest. Ben is a big boy. He's got a shed load of support financially and power behind him. It's going to be a close run thing, I think, for him, but there's more to come. Don't kid yourself. There's more to come. And that's really hard. That's really sad is the last emotion. I feel for my regiment and what it's going through and what it's about to go through. I think people are going to be potentially even more shocked as we go forward, and it's going to pull a lot of people into line around what they truly believe and how they truly want to be in this circus almost, Yeah. So it's mixed emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll call into question this fascination we have with tall poppies in Australia and celebrity culture. and the myth of the Anzac and all of the issues we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's going to bring in everything from Cam Bancroft and how he was dealt with, and the Essendon football drugs, and O.J. Simpson and Lance Armstrong and Cardinal Pell. You know, we've been down here before. History rhymes, and there's a few notes for you to kind of contemplate as we go through this, because it won't tell us everything, but it will hint at what we're about to enter.
If you could offer one piece of unfiltered advice you wish every serving member about to take off the uniform or to stay in the uniform, what would it be?
I'm going to go first so Kate can finish up.
Yeah.
Look, I think, as I've said, don't let it be all you are. You're more than the sum of your parts. And although the Defence Force is going to play a huge role in who you become and how you become that person, be something else as well. You are more defined than just that. Defence life is awesome. I'd turn around and do it all again tomorrow, even with all the mistakes and the regrets and everything like that. The mates I have now, I'm indebted to for their good compassion and their good judgment of maintaining me as a friend. Good judgment, I'm not sure. But I think there's that the mateship's real, and I would encourage anyone exploring going into defence to give it a red hot dip. You don't have to stay in it for life, but you'll be a better person for it. I truly believe that.
Love that. Kate?
Yeah, I look back at my time, and it's been a very substantial commitment, and I've had to arrive at a place where I just can't afford to entertain any regrets about roads not taken and stuff. And when I look at it and look at the 17-year-old kid who turned up at RMC in 1974, I've been very privileged to serve with some extraordinary Australians, like just incredible honour. Whenever people ask me about the Army, I always say especially young people looking at a future, and say, well, there are other organisations where you might make more money, you'll do certain things, but you tell me one organisation in Australia where tonight there's an unrecovered remains team on the Western Front still looking for soldiers who died 110 years ago, and they bring them home. They don't do that at Macquarie Bank. They don't do that in the APS. Yeah, it's something that is beyond words. But as Harry said, you got to know when it's over. I'm nudging 70 next week. It comes a time, and you do have to say that is wonderful. But if I'm going to have a good life, you need to live in the present moment. You need to be present and not have regrets, and just live in nostalgia. And I see a lot of the older veterans who all they want to talk about is Vietnam still. And I can understand it, but it isn't the pathway to being sane and happy. Yes. If that's all you got to keep you going. So yeah.
Hugely insightful words from both of you. Today, we began by grounding ourselves in the objective reality of 2026, looking at the geopolitical pressures and the institutional strains that define the current state of veteran health. We then pivoted to the raw reality of the individual, exploring the identity shocks and the invisible scars that remain long after the mission can end. And finally, we looked forward, identifying the smarter systems and some professional resonance needed to... Resonance, I can't say that word. Finally, we looked forward, identifying the smarter systems and professional resonance needed to intentionally construct a resilient future for those who have served. The uniform might come off, but the human reality continues. I want to thank both Harry and Kate for being so generous and honest with your stories. I also want to say how proud I am to sit in a room with the both of you and your service history and your contribution in protecting country, in talking about how we protect country together. And I hope to see you both again in future, leading the way and carving the path for others as you do. I'm Crystal Perkins, and this is Unfiltered. Thanks for listening to this episode of Unfiltered. Click follow to get notified about future episodes, streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Leaving a review helps others find the podcast. And if you'd like to connect, follow me at crystalperkins_1.